He jerked sideways behind a broken bulkhead, adrenaline pounding as the shot sizzled past his cheek. His hand darted to the sidearm strapped to his thigh, fumbling with the clasp in the hazy green gloom of the ravaged corridor. A flash of violet light flickered just ahead, illuminating slick, twisted metal and droplets of thick fluid dripping from overhead pipes. He inhaled a breath of scorched ozone and realized he wasn't alone. Slender fingertips brushed the nape of his neck. He spun, muzzle raised, only to meet gleaming amber eyes and a face both haunting and fierce. The alien woman's lips were parted, revealing small tapered fangs that glinted in the flickering light. Before he could fire, she pressed a glowing blade against his chest armor, so close he could feel the faint hum of its power. "You move, you die," she hissed. Her voice resonated in his bones, not entirely in any language he recognized, but he understood her well enough. He swallowed, muscles tense. "Lady," he breathed, keeping as still as possible. "I think we're both in trouble." He gestured with his eyes toward the far end of the corridor. Shadows shifted and clanked there. Enemy patrols. She narrowed her eyes at him, scanning him up and down. Her form was lithe and draped in alien war gear that shimmered with faint glyphs. A scaled mantle slid across her shoulders, pulsing with an otherworldly luminescence, as if it was alive and reacting to her mood. She blinked once, a subtle swirl of color rippling across her throat. She seemed to be evaluating whether to stab him or let him speak. For a second, everything froze, and he was struck by the bizarre urge to grin. He'd always had terrible timing, but dying in the middle of some labyrinthine warship with a viciously beautiful alien assassin at his throat wasn't on his list of ways to go. Yet, something in her posture told him she was more than just a nameless killer. They both heard the metallic stomp of boots. With a low curse, the human jerked his head toward a sliver of open corridor, half choked with debris. "We can hide in there." Her blade pressed harder against him, the hum intensifying. For half a heartbeat, he was sure she'd run him through. But then, with a swift movement, she grabbed his wrist, yanked him forward, and together they tumbled into the cramped alcove. Dim emergency lighting barely revealed the small space, overshadowed by tangles of cables and collapsed wall panels. It forced them into uncomfortably close proximity. Her skin gleamed with an unearthly brilliance, and a faint swirl of lavender light played across the scales that traced her arms. He found himself pinned against her, the warmth of her body at odds with her lethal efficiency. He could smell something metallic and sweet, like ozone mixed with crushed flowers. It was strange, but compelling. She exhaled softly, eyes flicking toward the corridor. Soldiers marched past, calling out in harsh tongues. Their weapons glowed the same ugly green as the overhead emergency luminescence. He risked a tiny whisper near her ear. "They're here for you or me." She cast him a sidelong glance, unimpressed. The tension rolling off her was palpable, but so was a kind of impulsive curiosity. He guessed she wanted to kill him to tie up loose ends. But maybe she needed him if the patrol was after her, or if the corridors were too unfamiliar for a clean escape. Her scales shifted color again in subtle waves. He swallowed, glancing away from her unnerving beauty. Another group of soldiers clomped past, scanning the gloom. He dared not move. She was pressed so close to him he could feel the thrumming of her heart. Or was that her weapon? He couldn't tell. Time stretched, the patrol's footsteps fed. "Ed." She released him with an annoyed click of her tongue, stepping back just enough that the tip of her blade no longer threatened to pierce his armor. He exhaled, raising his hands in a peace gesture. "I'm just trying to get off this wreck," he said. "If you want to kill me, go for it, but it won't help you escape." She regarded him with a dispassionate lift of her brows. When she spoke, her accent was thick, but her basic was surprisingly understandable. "You are no threat to me. You are only an inconvenience." She flicked her gaze to the corridor, then back to him. "Do you know this place?" He suppressed a bitter laugh. "Not exactly. I was scavenging. Ship got hit by some corporate bounty hunters, crashed here. Next thing I know, you're slicing the heads off half their crew." He studied the slight shift of her expression, the way her chin tilted proudly at the mention of the kill. "Did they have a contract on you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed her blade toward the corridor. "We move, you first." He held out his hands in a show of compliance. "Fair enough, princess." The moment the word left his mouth, he regretted it. Her eyes blazed, and for an instant, her blade swiped so close to his cheek, he felt a sting of ozo. "Nee, do not call me that," she growled. He nodded quickly. "Right, sure, let's move." He led her into the corridor, staying low. The place was an industrial nightmare of twisted scaffolding, ruptured vents, and shattered doors. Sparks occasionally cascaded from overhead, lighting their path with random flares that revealed the scale of devastation. He didn't bother with introductions, didn't seem the time. But curiosity gnawed at him. She walked gracefully, each step measured, every sense seemingly alert. The odd glow that traced her limbs shifted from violet to a deep pulsing turquoise like a breath or heartbeat. They ducked under a collapsed conduit. In the near distance, they heard more patrols searching the wreck. He wondered if she'd vanish the moment she got the chance. But she stuck close, occasionally shoving him aside or gripping his shoulder when she heard movement. Each time they touched, a strange static charge prickled his skin. He tried not to stare at the hypnotic patterns shimmering across her slender neck. He tried not to wonder what it would feel like to press his palm against those scales. A sudden clang made them freeze. Two battered drones hovered into view, scanning with flickering green sensors. He caught her eye, silently counting. On 3, they dashed forward. He fired shots at the drones while she flicked her blade in swift arcs that left glowing trails. Sparks burst in the musty air, drones crashing to the deck in smoldering pieces. Even with the metallic tang of destruction swirling in the corridor, he felt the rush of adrenaline mingling with something else. A spark of heat in his stomach every time their gazes locked. It felt insane. He shouldn't be thinking this way about someone who'd threatened to gut him a minute earlier. But the tension between them crackled, undeniable. They pushed onward. After a tense moment hiding from another patrol, they finally found a vent leading to a dark maintenance tunnel. The narrow space forced them to crouch and practically crawl in single file. He heard her breathing behind him, felt her near-silent presence at his back, the occasional brush of her fingers against his calf when the path got too cramped. It sent tiny jolts of awareness through his body. His mind churned with possibilities. Who was she? Why was she hunted? And why couldn't he stop imagining how her strange, scaled skin might feel under his hands? When they emerged into a dim chamber crammed with old cargo crates, he let out the breath he'd been holding. "We can rest here for a sec." He turned to look at her. She was scanning the room with a predator's sharp gaze. "We cannot linger," she said, voice laced with urgency. "There will be more." Before he could respond, she grabbed him again, pressed him to a wall, and angled her face close to his. He felt her breath on his lips. His heart hammered. "You saved me once," she murmured, amber eyes burning into his. "I did not kill you. Now you will help me, or I slit your throat and do it alone." Despite the threat, he caught a hint of, was that gratitude in her eyes? It was gone in an instant. He found himself whispering, "I don't even know your name." She hesitated, tension locking her jaw. Then, in a low tone that brushed against his senses like a living thing, she said, "I am Varish." She lingered for a fraction of a second, scales shimmering a soft pink hue, then released him. They stood apart, the cargo lights buzzing overhead, heart still racing from the close encounter. He didn't reply, only nodded, storing away the name that would surely haunt his dreams if he ever got out of here alive. They crept from the cargo hold with no further words, listening for the hum of search patrols, uncertain if they could trust each other beyond necessity. Yet with each shared glance, the air thickened with unspoken tension. And, though he didn't even know if she was friend or foe, he couldn't deny the electric thrill of being near her. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was the start of something unstoppable. He was about to open his mouth to speak again when a fresh explosion rocked the ship. Overhead lights flickered wildly and the floor pitched. Varish grabbed him before he fell, her grip so firm he felt the bruising pressure through his sleeve. And he let himself be steadied, for just a moment, by this alien assassin whose motives he couldn't begin to unravel. A swirl of color rippled across her throat, then settled into a cool, cobalt glow. She gently released him, pointed down another corridor, and quietly they set off, uncertain allies in a shattered warship that offered no easy exits and no mercy for the hunted. They'd barely gone a dozen steps when more gunfire crackled, echoing in the steel labyrinth. and each found themselves rushing forward side by side into a darkness that promised only chaos and trouble. Yet an unspoken understanding crackled between them. They'd keep each other alive, for now. They made it to a half-seal, deep blast door, the edges scarred and fused. He pried it open just enough for them to slip through. Varish's blade illuminated the gloom, casting dancing shadows against the floor. She paused, one hand splayed on his back, and whispered in a tone that sent shivers through him, "Careful." He almost laughed at the quiet protectiveness threading that single word. As they eased inside, the battered warship groaned beneath them, reminding him they were on borrowed time. But he found himself daring to think that maybe, just maybe, if they survived, he'd find out why fate had thrown them together, and maybe by then, she'd see him as more than an inconvenience. The thought both thrilled and frightened him. He took a breath, steadied himself, and silently led her deeper, following twisted corridors lit only by flickering emergency lights, blind to what awaited them, but unable to stop the hunger that churned in his chest every time he felt her presence at his side. He tried not to look too long at her silhouette in the half-light, tried not to dwell on the exotic curvature of her form, but it was impossible. Something about her compelled him beyond reason, and, judging by the way she sometimes hovered near him, gaze flicking with that faint IRL of pink in her scales, she sensed it too. Tension kindled, unspoken, in every breath they shared. They heard the approach of another patrol. With a grimace he murmured, "We'd better find a place to hide." She nodded sharply, and with silent agreement, they continued on, each step forging the strange bond that might yet save them, or destroy them both. It took them the better part of an hour to find a marginally safer corner of the downed warship. Twisted corridors stretched in labyrinthine loops, half flooded with acrid smoke or blocked by structural collapses. They scrambled through vents and over heaps of debris, uncomfortably aware of corporate soldiers combing the ship. Varish radiated tense focus, her body poised for combat at every moment, her blade crackling softly in the dimness. But as they moved, he noticed the subtle ways she fought exhaustion, a tremor in her hand after each skirmish, the fleeting way she leaned against a bulkhead when she thought he wasn't looking. She had to be running on fumes, same as him. They finally collapsed into a dark corner near the remnants of an engineering console that flickered with the last vestiges of emergency power. He unhooked a small canteen from his belt. "Water?" he offered, tapping the container. Her expression, half distrustful, softened just a fraction. She slid closer, eyeing the canteen warily. Then she snatched it from his hand, took a small sip, and made a face as if it tasted off. "It is bitter," she remarked, returning it. "But thank you." Her voice wavered slightly, the constant tension draining her. He studied her expression. She was still coiled for danger, but her shoulders slumped in momentary relief. He slumped against a scorched wall panel, letting out a long sigh. "I've got a small ship hidden in the hangar bay, if we can reach it." The corners of her lips quirked. "You expect me to trust your escape plan?" He shrugged. "Don't see many better options around here." Thunderous crashing echoed in the distance, punctuated by sporadic gunfire. Her gaze flicked that way, then returned to him. "Fine," she said, voice tense. "We use your ship. We get off this husk, and then—" She trailed off. In the faint light, he saw her scales undulate with a myriad of unreadable colors. For a moment, there was raw uncertainty on her face. He tilted his head, curiosity piqued. "Then what, you head back to your people?" She scoffed, though a trace of sadness underlined the sound. "I have no people to return to," she said. That admission hung between them, heavy as the twisted wreckage they hid among. He said nothing for a moment, letting the hum of the damaged systems fill the silence. He'd lost his own family years ago, so he knew that kind of wound. "Guess we have that in common," he finally replied. Her gaze met his, searching, perhaps for deception or pity, but he offered neither. She nodded, though her eyes still held that guarded wariness. Suddenly, a concussive blast rocked the corridor. Sparks rained down, and he threw himself over her, shielding her instinctively. A panel behind them blew out, showering them with debris. She stiffened under him, then shoved him off the second the tremor subsided. "You are foolish," she hissed, but her expression was conflicted. She rose to her feet, glancing around as if to see if the roof might cave in. The alien markings along her arms glowed in agitated pulses. He picked himself up, brushing off metal shards. It's called being polite. You could at least pretend to appreciate it. She stared at him in exasperation, then looked away. You humans, she said, almost to herself as if remembering something from her past. Then she took a breath, turned toward a battered corridor that presumably led to the hangar. Lead, she said curtly. He fell in step beside her. Despite her command, she didn't lag behind. Instead, she walked at his shoulder, blade raised, eyes scanning every shadow. They exchanged glances every so often, wordless in their cooperation. A tenuous alliance formed between them, fragile as spider silk but holding strong in the face of danger. Minutes later, they nearly stumbled over a corporate trooper kneeling near a console, presumably trying to slice into the ship's system. Varish dispatched him in a graceful, silent strike before he could so much as yell. The man collapsed, leaving behind a trail of flickering sparks from the console. She paused, looked at the screen. Map, she said quietly. Indeed, it showed partial schematics of the warship, though many sections blinked red with catastrophic damage. He studied it as best he could, searching for the route to the hangar. There, he whispered, pointing to a path that wove through several collapsed zones. She nodded, a determined set to her jaw. They memorized the route quickly, then, eyes meeting, they moved on. As they wove through the corridors, he realized the tension between them wasn't simply born of fear or survival. It had an undercurrent of something deeper, a gravitational pull that he couldn't name. Whenever their arms brushed or he felt the gentle cling of her alien mantle against his back in tight spaces, that pull grew more insistent, and sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, she'd watch him, her lips parted in an unreadable expression. After dispatching another drone, they found a sealed door marked with alien glyphs. The console was partially functional. She tapped it with gloved fingers that hummed with an internal energy, and to his amazement, the door slid open with a tortured squeal. Inside was a chamber full of half-dismantled stasis pods, the air thick with a pungent, sweet odor. Translucent pods glowed faintly, their contents either missing or in advanced states of decay. He coughed, covering his mouth with his sleeve. She scrunched her nose in disgust. This place was once a research vessel, she muttered, scanning the pods. Twisted into something else. Before he could ask what she meant, she turned to him, her voice dropping. We should be quick. Skirting broken pods and strange fluids, they crossed the chamber. He felt a cold dread in the pit of his stomach. Something about this place reeked of morally dubious experiments. Varish's posture tensed, her scales flickering with a restless, deep red color that signaled more than mere annoyance. But they kept going, stepping through the chamber into another corridor that sloped downward. Dim emergency lights revealed the path. He clenched his jaw. This route had better lead closer to the hangar, or else they'd be trapped in some horrific maze of leftover... A pair of troopers rounded the bend unexpectedly. Gunfire erupted. Varish darted forward with uncanny speed, her blade slicing through one soldier's armor. Meanwhile, he fired his own sidearm at the second trooper. The corridor flared with muzzle flashes, the air sizzling from Varish's shimmering weapon. In seconds, it was over. He stood panting, heart pounding, smoke curling from the tip of his pistol. She wiped the blood from her blade onto a rag lying nearby, her jaw set. They said nothing, but their eyes locked in the flickering light. His breath caught at the intensity he saw in her gaze, something that mirrored his own roiling emotions. They pushed on, occasionally forced to duck behind half-collapsed support beams or scramble over debris. Each time they encountered danger, they fought side by side, a surprisingly fluid tandem. He was a lethal dancer with that blade, moving with predatory grace while he provided covering fire. They pressed on until they found a sealed hatch that, according to the half-glimpsed schematics, led to a central elevator system near the hangar. The control panel flickered ominously, half dead. Varish bent over it, pressing her palm to the interface. Strands of light danced across her skin, and the console beeped in protest. He watched in fascination, sweat dripping down his temples. She muttered something under her breath, an alien phrase that buzzed with layered subharmonics. The panel whirred, dimly powered up, and the hatch hissed open. Inside was an elevator platform battered by falling debris, but still functional enough to descend a few decks. He stepped onto it warily. She joined him, expression tense. He tapped the control, and the platform groaned, beginning its slow, shaky descent. Metal scraped against metal, showering them with sparks in places. He raised an eyebrow at her. "Let's hope we don't die here." She smirked, a fleeting expression that made his pulse skip. "If we do, at least you die quickly, human," he snorted, comforting. Her gaze lingered on him, and he caught the faint pink glow rippling across her N. "Eek? You have a name?" she asked quietly, as if surprising herself by wanting to know. He paused, heart hammering. "Kyle," he said finally. Her lips parted, tasting the unfamiliar syllable. "Kyle," she repeated, voice almost soft. He realized they were standing very close, the flickering elevator light casting their shadows in strange patterns across the walls. The platform rattled to a stop, jarring them both. The moment passed. She stepped off first, raising her blade. "Come," she commanded, all business again. He followed, mentally replaying the sound of his name on her tongue. They set off down the corridor, pressing toward the hangar, and whatever waited beyond. Part of him hoped it was only trouble, because that seemed far simpler than grappling with the wild tangle of emotions twisting in his gut. But destiny rarely offered simplicity, and with Varish at his side, the odds of a clean getaway were as murky as the swirling gloom enveloping them. They reached a set of heavy doors leading to a corridor that branched off toward the hangar. The door's locking mechanisms glowed red, and a voice crackled through a nearby intercom. "Intruders! Subdeck shoot on sight!" Corporate troopers were definitely on their trail now. Kale pressed an ear to the door, trying to gauge how many footsteps he could hear on the other side. Varish grabbed his shoulder, pulling him back with a silent glare. She motioned for him to stand aside, then she crouched, placing her palm against a small control panel. Her scales shimmered turquoise, and the panel sparked in protest. For a moment, Kale thought she might blow the fuse. Instead, the door slid open a crack, allowing them to peer into the wide corridor beyond. Two guards, heavily armed, stood in front of the next checkpoint. Past them, a big sign read "Hangar Access." Kale nearly laughed in relief. So close. He turned to Varish, signaled to her, "Two guards." She nodded. With lethal grace, she slipped through the crack, disappearing into the corridor's shadows. Kale waited, breath held. One guard gave a short, confused grunt. Then a strangled cry, a clang of armor hitting the deck. Another grunt silenced mid-breath, then only silence. He pushed the door open wider, stepping through carefully. Varish stood between the bodies, blade humming with residual energy. Her chest rose and fell with quiet adrenaline. She slid her gaze to him, letting him see the smoldering look in her eyes. For a moment, there was an almost less feral satisfaction that radiated from her. He felt a shiver that wasn't entirely fear. They approached the checkpoint console. "Hangars through there," Ciel whispered, pointing at a massive, half-jammed blast door. He tapped a control, cursing under his breath when it stayed locked. Varish tried her palm trick again, but the mechanism spat sparks and refused to budge. "We'll have to override it from the security station," he muttered, glancing around. She frowned, scanning the corridor. "Time is short," she growled like a warning. Footsteps and voices echoed in the distance, likely more patrols. He spotted a side door labeled "Security." Without waiting for her approval, he sprinted toward it, motioning for her to follow. They slipped inside, finding a small cluster of consoles and monitors. One screen displayed a glitchy feed of the hangar. Kale's heart leapt. There was his battered shuttle, pinned under debris but seemingly intact. Soldiers were actively searching the area, but they hadn't destroyed the ship yet. He found the override controls. "Cover me," he said, fingers flying over the battered keyboard. She hovered by the door, blade at the ready, tension rolling off her. The overhead lights flickered, and Kale cursed as the interface beeped. He had to bypass multiple layers of corporate security. Come on," he muttered, pressing keys. Behind him, Varish tensed. "Hurry," she hissed. The corridor outside was alive with the clatter of boots. A muffled shout came from right outside the door. Kale's heart hammered as the console beeped again in protest. Then, finally, it chirped a confirmation. "Yes," he gasped. "Door's unlocked." The security feed flickered, showing the blast door rolling open in the hangar corridor. Varish caught his eye, a spark of shared triumph passing between them. "Move!" she snapped, voice taut but tinged with fierce exhilaration. They burst from the security station just as four more troopers rounded the corner. Weapons fire rained toward them. Kale dropped to a knee and returned fire while Varish launched herself forward in a deadly blur. The troopers shouted, unleashing a storm of bullets and energy blasts. Kale's heart pounded. He dove behind a fallen chunk of metal, loosing shots that ricocheted across the corridor. One soldier went down. Varish spun, her blade carving arcs of sizzling blue across the air. The remaining troopers fell under her onslaught, and Kale provided cover whenever a stray soldier tried to flank her. When the echo of gunfire finally dissipated, the corridor reeked of scorched metal and ozone. Panting, they locked eyes amid the carnage. She was breathing heavily, eyes wild with adrenaline. Her scales rippled with shifting color, sweat beading on her temples. He felt his chest tighten, heat rushing through him in an unsettling wave. She stared at him, as if she felt the same rising undertow, but then she exhaled, wiping blood from the corner of her mouth, and nodded toward the corridor. "Go," she said hoarsely. They took off at a run, racing through the newly opened blast door, ignoring the shriek of alarms that now blared through the warship's corridors. Every muscle in Kyle's body ached, but he forced himself to keep pace. Varish ran beside him, her steps sure and agile. The tension between them seemed to radiate with every stride. Once or twice she glanced over at him, that same flicker of pink dancing at her throat. He wanted to ask if she was okay, but there was no time. At last they emerged into the hangar bay. It was a sprawling chamber littered with twisted supports and shattered crates. Pieces of fallen infrastructure crisscrossed the deck, and overhead lighting sparked in random flashes. Kale's shuttle was in the far corner, partially pinned under a collapsed beam. The hull was dented, but hopefully not beyond repair. A handful of corporate soldiers were stationed around it, scanning for signs of intruders. Varish gripped Kale's forearm, pulling him behind a cluster of overturned cargo crates before the troopers could see them. She leaned in, her breath warm against his ear. "We kill them, free your ship, and escape," he nodded, heart hammering. In that moment, her closeness sent a surge of conflicting emotions through him. Desire, fear, awe at her lethal grace. He could sense her energy coiled tight, ready to strike. Together, they peeked around the crates. He counted 5 troopers. One of them was tinkering with a heavy plasma cannon pointed right at the shuttle's cockpit. They had to stop him before he reduced the ship to slag. Kale motioned for Varish to circle right while he took the left. She nodded sharply. He inched around the crates, weaving among debris, staying out of sight. When he got close enough to line up a shot, he gestured to her with a silent signal. She sprang from the shadows, blade blazing. The troopers shouted, momentarily distracted. Kale popped out of cover and fired. One trooper fell, then another. Varys spun in a deadly dance, disarming the one near the plasma cannon. Kale took down the last trooper, heart pounding like a drum. An eerie silence fell over the hangar as the final body hit the deck. Gasping, Kale lowered his pistol, glancing around for any remaining threats. None. He hurried to the shuttle. "Help me with this beam," he said. Varish joined him, and together they heaved the twisted metal off the ship's hull. It screeched in protest, but finally gave way. A flurry of sparks rained down, making them flinch. "Let's hope the engines still fire," Kale muttered. He rushed to the side hatch, punching in the code. The door stuttered, then slid open with a horrendous grinding noise. "Hurry," Varish urged, scanning for reinforcements. Alarms still blared across the warship, no doubt drawing more troopers. Kale ducked inside the cramped cockpit, slamming himself into the pilot seat. The screens flickered to life, though half of them showed static. Varish stood behind him, her presence a vibrating wall of tension. "Well?" she demanded as he tried the ignition. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared, albeit shakily. Kale allowed himself a small smile. "We've got thrust." She grabbed onto the overhead rye. "El go," she ordered. He needed no further encouragement. He toggled thrusters and the craft wobbled upward, clearing debris by a hair's breadth. He guided the shuttle toward the hangar doors. Varish leaned between the seats, eyes on the readouts. "Open the bay!" Kale cursed. The external doors are sealed. We need manual override, she growled in frustration. We will be overrun if we wait. Kale realized they had seconds, not minutes, before corporate troopers stormed the hangar. Hang on, he muttered, flipping a switch on the console. The shuttle's weapons system powered up with a disgruntled whine. He aimed carefully at the overhead mechanism controlling the hangar doors. Please, don't blow the entire bay, he murmured under his breath. Varish braced herself, eyes gleaming. He fired. A bright lance of energy lanced into the control unit above. Sparks erupted and the massive bay doors groaned. For a harrowing moment, it looked like they might remain locked. Then they shuddered open, inch by inch, exposing the star-flecked vacuum beyond. Kale let out a shaky laugh, punching the thrusters. The shuttle shot out into open space, free of the crippled warship. His relief was short-lived. 2 corporate fighter craft flanked them, almost immediately unleashing blasts that rocked his shields. Strap in, Kale yelled at Varish. She buckled into the seat behind him, knuckles white on the harness. I'll outrun them, he said through gritted teeth, angling the shuttle away from the warship. The battered vessel groaned under the strain, but it accelerated. The corporate fighters gave chase, sending bright streaks of plasma at them. Alarms shrieked in the cockpit. Varish hissed curses in her language, tension thick in her voice. Kale jinked to the left, rolling to avoid a direct hit. The shuttle rattled. Weapons a short range, he warned her. She grabbed the co-pilot's yoke, scanning the targeting system. I see them. Keep steady. He tried to hold course as best he could, weaving erratically to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. Varish locked onto the nearest fighter, firing a burst of plasma. The shot connected, and the fighter spiraled away, trailing smoke. Nice, Kale panted. The second fighter swooped in behind them. The shuttle's engine wailed under the strain. He dipped down, letting the planet's gravitational pull give them a boost. Another volley of enemy fire grazed their hull, sending sparks flying across the console. Varish didn't hesitate. She spun the turret to lock onto the second fighter. Now! Kale barked. She fired. A direct hit. The fighter burst in a brilliant flash. She let out a harsh breath. Kale roared in triumph, though relief was overshadowed by the dreadful rumbling from his battered shuttle. They were descending toward the planet's surface now, the curvature of the horizon filling the view. We've got no choice, Kale said. We'll land somewhere safe, patch up the ship. Varish nodded wordlessly. The tension in her shoulders eased. Just a bit. He guided the shuttle into the upper atmosphere. Sensors flickered, indicating thick jungle below. The screen stuttered with warnings. Low fuel, hull compromised, multiple system failures. He wrestled with the controls, forcing a half-controlled descent. Sweat dripped down his brow. The hull glowed with friction. Varish pressed close, gripping the back of his seat. She said nothing, but her presence spurred him on. Hold together, he muttered, coaxing the shuttle. They broke through cloud cover, swirling green canopy rushing up to meet them. He spotted a wide clearing near a snaking river. It would have to do. He braced for impact. The shuttle plowed into the clearing with a screech of metal. Trees crashed around them, the hull scraping over rock and brush. Finally, they ground to a halt, battered but alive. For a few seconds, neither of them moved, trying to catch their breath. Smoke coiled from the console. Kale slumped, adrenaline fading. Varish placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip trembling, though her tone was steady. We made it. He forced a shaky grin. We did. Slowly, they unbuckled. Outside the cockpit windows, the jungle teemed with strange plants. Luminous vines draped over tall, broad trunks, and swirls of mist that glowed faintly in the dusk light. It was eerily beautiful and undoubtedly dangerous. Varish lingered, scanning the readouts. Is the shuttle fixable? He sighed. We'll have to see what can be salvaged. She nodded, then turned to him, her alien eyes locking onto his. Thank you for saving me again. Her words were laced with reluctant sincerity, and a wave of warmth flooded him. He scratched the back of his neck. Likewise, he murmured, remembering how many times her blade had cut down troopers before they could kill him. Guess that makes us even. She stared at him a moment longer, then turned away, the pink hue again dancing across her throat. He exhaled, letting the tension seep out of him. Outside, the jungle rustled with unknown life, beckoning them into the next challenge. The battered shuttle hissed, engines ticking as they cooled. Kyle looked over at Varish's graceful form, her scales still pulsing with post-battle energy, and wondered what kind of cosmic joke had thrown them together. Allies? Adversaries? Something else entirely. He swallowed, heart pounding as he recalled the feel of her pressed against him in those cramped corridors. They'd barely escaped with their lives, and now here they were, shipwrecked together on some uncharted planet, with an unspoken hunger coiling between them like a living thing. He stood, knees weak, and looked around at the swirling green haze outside. "We should find shelter and supplies," he said. She nodded. "Let us go," she replied. Her voice was steady, but she didn't meet his eyes. He almost reached for her hand, then thought better of it. Instead, they stepped from the shuttle side by side into the emerald gloom of a place that felt untamed and alive in ways he couldn't comprehend, and under it all he felt an insistent, undeniable spark drawing him closer to Varish, a bond forged in battle, overshadowed by secrets, and fueled by an attraction he could no longer deny. The air was thick with humidity that clung to every pore, making Kyle's clothes stick to his skin. Dense foliage surrounded the crash site, vibrant and teeming with alien life. Leaves larger than his body glowed at the edges, and twisting vines pulsed with faint luminescence. Occasional flickers of neon, insectile creatures skittered across the foliage, vanishing into the lush undergrowth with soft chittering sounds. Varish took point, her posture alert as she scanned for threats. Kale trudged behind, sidearm clutched, mindful of the possibility that corporate trackers might follow them down. In the clearing behind them, the shuttle still hissed and popped. The hull was battered, thrusters offline, but at least the living quarters inside remained partially intact. He had enough rations to last a while, if they stretched them carefully. But the biggest concern was how they'd get off this planet, and how to avoid corporate pursuers if they decided to send more ships. They stopped near a cluster of moss-covered boulders. Varish raised a hand. "Hear that?" she whispered. Kale strained his ears. A gentle rushing sound came from somewhere in the trees, like water. He nodded. "River, maybe?" She exhaled softly. "We should clean and treat Wu." Yes. She pointed to a gash on his arm he hadn't noticed, presumably from flying debris. Blood seeped through his torn sleeve. He winced. "Right. Good call." They pushed through the foliage, carefully parting glowing fronds, until they found a narrow river winding through a grove of massive, twisted trunks. The water glimmered with faint bioluminescent particles, creating a surreal shifting rainbow across the surface. Varish knelt at the bank, dipping her hand in cautiously. She sniffed the liquid, eyebrows knit as she considered its safety. Kale joined her, gaze roaming the exotic surroundings. Tall root structures jutted from the riverbed, creating natural arches. Strange avian creatures with shimmering plumage sang haunting melodies overhead. It was almost peaceful, if not for the swirl of tension between them. He crouched, splashing water on his face and hissing at the sting. Varish watched him, her expression guarded. "You're hurt," she stated, pointing at a bruise forming above his eye. He shrugged. "I'll survive." She stared a moment, then handed him a small vial from her belt. "Medicine. Use it." He blinked in surprise. "Thanks." He dabbed some on his wound, feeling a soothing coolness spread across his skin. Meanwhile, she stripped off a piece of her own torn garment, revealing a sliver of scaled midsection glimmering with faint, mesmerizing patterns. He tried not to stare as she dabbed water on the cloth, then began cleaning a cut along her arm. Her teeth clenched with pain, but she made no sound. Something about the vulnerability of the moment knotted his chest. He wanted to help her, but she had that proud, defiant air, as if she'd bite his head off if he offered. Instead, he just scooted closer, gingerly offering to hold the cloth. She hesitated, scanning his face as if searching for hidden motives. Finally, she relinquished the cloth, letting him wipe the blood away from her wound. Her scales shifted color where he touched, a ripple of lavender that made his pulse quicken. Neither of them spoke, but the air seemed to crackle. He was acutely aware of her closeness, the exotic scent of her, like electricity and crushed petals. She regarded him with heavy-lidded eyes, tension radiating from her. Yet she didn't pull away. They both felt the magnetism in that brief touch. He swallowed hard, finishing the cleaning quickly, then stepped back, handing her the cloth. A hush lingered between them, charged with the unspoken question, what now? She breath, broke eye contact, rising to her feet in a fluid motion. We should find higher ground, that might be safer. Her voice was crisp, as if reasserting her control. Kale wiped sweat from his brow and nodded. Fine, let's see if we can scout from that ridge up there. Through the trees, he could make out a rocky outcropping that jutted over the treetops. Maybe they'd get a better view of the area, possibly locate a more secure spot to camp. They trudged uphill through vine-laden slopes. Sweat beaded on Kale's forehead, and he could see Varish's scales gleaming under the moist light that filtered through the canopy. Occasionally, she'd reach out and brush aside a particularly intrusive vine, the glow of her skin reflecting off the vegetation in mesmerizing patterns. He tried to focus on the path, but it was hard not to notice the subtle grace of her movements, the way her body seemed in tune with this alien environment. At one point, the ground gave way beneath Kale's foot. He slipped, nearly sliding down a muddy embankment. Varys reacted instantly, seizing his wrist in a firm grip that halted his fall. Their eyes locked, her chest heaving. He could feel the heat of her skin through his sleeve. A jolt of something more than adrenaline speared him. For a moment, they simply stared, hearts pounding, the jungle's alien sounds swirling around them. Then she grunted, pulled him upright, and released him, turning quickly away with an exasperated tension in her shoulders. They reached the ridge after another hour of climbing. The view was breathtaking, an endless canopy of bioluminescent trees, pockets of strange mist swirling between them, and far off in the distance, jagged mountains that shimmered with neon fungi. Night was falling, and the planet's sky glowed with two pale moons. Kale set down his pack, scanning the horizon for any sign of corporate pursuit. Seeing none, he let out a quiet sigh. Varys stood at the edge of the outcropping, arms crossed as if daring the world below to threaten them. He joined her. We'll need to find shelter soon. Maybe we should head back to the shuttle. It's better than nothing. She considered the question, her scales reflecting the moonlight in faint rippling patterns. Staying close to the crash site might be dangerous. But we have supplies there, yes? He nodded. We do. We'll keep watch. If they come for us, at least we'll have the ship to defend ourselves. She grunted in assent. Then her gaze slid over to him. Lingaria NG, she said softly, tasting his name again. He turned toward her, heart thumping. Vari, she replied, voice low. The quiet, charged moment stretched. She reached out, pressing her palm to his chest, over his pounding heart. A swirl of pink and turquoise rippled across her throat, as if she were waging some internal battle. Your heartbeat is loud, she murmured. He swallowed. You're making it that way. A ghost of a smile curved her lips. She leaned in, so close he felt the whisper of her breath. For a beat, he thought she might kiss him, or attack him, or both. The tension coiled unbearably, and he found himself leaning in too, carried by a tide of reckless desire. They hovered in that charged space, breath mingling, the alien wilderness bearing silent witness. But she pulled away abruptly, stepping back. He nearly lost his balance at the sudden absence of her warmth. She exhaled shakily, turning her gaze to the horizon. I cannot, she whispered, though her posture was rife with conflict. His own chest clenched. Why not? He asked softly, despite the frustration roiling in him. She pressed her lips together, refusing to answer. Instead, she flicked her gaze at the darkening sky. We return to your shuttle now. This is not safe. Her tone, though cool, trembled with something deeper. He nodded, chest tight, and turned to head back down the ridge. She followed, silent but for the sound of her measured breathing. A swirl of unspoken emotions pressed between them, thick and potent as the jungle's humidity. The trek back felt longer, weighed by the tension of the near intimacy they'd just shared. Whatever it was that flickered between them, attraction, need, confusion. Neither seemed ready to name it aloud, especially in a world so hostile, with the threat of corporate trackers looming in the distance. They reached the shuttle as night fell fully, the canopy above shimmering with countless bioluminescent specks. Inside the craft, the flickering cabin lights provided a small island of familiarity. Kyle rummaged through supplies, producing a few ration packs and a canister of water. Varish eyed them. That bitter water again? She commented with a faint grimace. He smirked. Better than dehydration. She conceded the point with a slight inclination of her head, taking a measured sip. They settled onto the floor near the console, exhaustion settling in. Time passed in silence as they ate. The only sounds, the rustling of wrappers and their quiet bursts. Eaths. Outside, alien creatures howled in the distance. Varish seemed distant, locked in her own thoughts. Kale's mind churned with too many questions. Finally, he asked, voice low, "Are you really an assassin?" She glanced at him. "I was." A bitter edge laced her words. "My clan demanded certain tasks for the Empire. I refused. So they put a bounty on my head. Corporate scum tried to claim it." She looked away. "I killed them." His stomach twisted. "Why'd you refuse?" She hesitated, color flickering in her scales. "They ordered me to eliminate innocents. My honor was not so broken that I could become a butcher." She let out a shaky breath. "So they turned on me. I became a hunted exile." Kyle didn't know what to say, so he stayed quiet, processing. She was lethal, sure, but also capable of mercy and moral choice. A swirl of compassion mingled with his attraction for her, tangling into a knot in his chest. She looked at him, eyes glinting in the dim cabin light. "What about you, pilot?" He gave a sardonic chuckle. "Me? I used to be a mercenary courier, got stiffed by the same corporate types that sold me out. I took a job from the wrong people, ended up on that warship. Now, I'm here." He shrugged, though the memory still burned. She studied him, a hint of sympathy in her gaze. "We both ran from something," she murmured. Silence settled again. Then, quietly, she said, "I owe you a debt." He looked at her, startled. "You don't owe me anything." She shook her head. "I do. You saved me." Her hand closed into a fist. "Among my people, that creates a bond. Even if we are exiles, some traditions remain." She tried to sound resolute, but her voice trembled slightly. He swallowed. "A bond?" She didn't elaborate, only turned her gaze away, as if half ashamed. "Sleep," she said, dismissing further questions. "We must be ready if they come for us at dawn." He nodded, knowing she was shutting him out, but also sensing that something deeper had shifted. They spread out makeshift bedding on the shuttle floor, backs turned to each other in the cramped space. Even so, Ciel could feel the warmth emanating from her body. Every breath reminded him of how close they'd come to crossing a line earlier. The darkness pressed in, broken only by the flicker of damaged console lights. Hours later, as he hovered on the edge of sleep, he felt movement. Vera shifted closer, her breathing soft and steady, though he couldn't tell if she was asleep or awake. Heart pounding, he resists. He had the urge to roll over and close that tiny distance. Instead, he closed his eyes, letting the moment stand between them, a wordless hush, pregnant with the possibility that the bond she'd mentioned might be real, and might demand more than either of them was prepared to give. Morning, if that's what one called the shifting glow of this planet's day, arrived, with pale teal light filtering through the canopy. Kyle stirred, stiff and sore from the cramped sleep on the shuttle floor. He glanced over to see Varish already awake, perched near the open hatch, silently watching the jungle. Her posture was thoughtful, shoulders relaxed in a way he hadn't seen before, though her blade was still within arm's reach. Outside, a swirl of chirping creatures heralded the new day. He moved beside her, rummaging for a ration pack. "Hungry?" he asked, voice still rough from sleep. She nodded once, accepting the pack with cool efficiency. The tension from last night's closeness lingered in the air, though neither spoke of it. They ate quickly, scanning the surrounding trees for any sign of intruders. Kyle found none, but he knew better than to assume they were safe. Corporate trackers might still be out there. After a while, he rose and began examining the shuttle's hull. Varish trailed him, arms folded as he kicked at a warped thruster. "We're not flying this baby anytime soon," he grumbled. "I need parts, spare couplings, circuit boards, hull patches. Maybe we can salvage from the warship if it crashed nearby." She shook her head. "That wreck will be swarming with your corporate enemies." He let out a frustrated breath. "Probably. Maybe I can locate a salvage yard or settlement on this planet, but I've never even heard of this place, she frowned, scanning the dense jungle. We could explore, see if there is civilization, but we do not know who rules here. Could be dangerous. He let out a hollow laugh. Everything's dangerous. It's kind of my life story. She almost smiled at that. Almost. She flicked her gaze to the canopy overhead. Then we should move. The longer we stay, the more time they have to find us. Kale nodded. Grabbing his small field bag, he checked his sidearm. All right, let's see if we can find high ground or some sign of life. We'll come back to the shuttle when we know more. Varish agreed silently, and they set off into the jungle once again. A few hours in, they trudged through a dense patch of undergrowth so thick they had to slash vines out of the way. The vines oozed a milky substance that glowed on contact with the air, but fortunately didn't burn. Sweat trickled down Kale's spine. This place was a sauna, each breath thick with humidity. Meanwhile, Varish glided through the foliage like it was second nature, though the occasional flicker in her scales suggested strain. She paused often, tilting her head, as if listening to frequencies he couldn't detect. Once, she crouched low, touching the ground. He glimpsed something like a faint resonance passing through her fingertips into the soil. She muttered, "There is movement ahead." Sure enough, they soon stumbled upon a clearing where an ancient ruin stood, massive stone blocks covered in thick moss and creeping vines. The structure seemed out of place on this lush, uncharted planet, as though remnants of a long-dead civilization. Pillars rose from the ground, carved with swirling patterns that glowed faintly in the shadows. Kale's heart quickened. This might be a clue to some local heritage, or maybe even a place to hide from corporate patrols. They entered cautiously. The ruin opened into a central courtyard where broken statues lay scattered. Varish moved beside him, blade raised, eyes scanning for threats. A shift of air caught Kale's attention. He halted, straining his ears. Rustling came from behind one of the toppled pillars. He raised his pistol, stepping forward. In an instant, a figure lunged from the shadows, a local creature, bipedal but covered in luminous stripes. It screeched in alarm, brandishing a spear that crackled with static. Kale backed up, pistol aimed, but Varish placed a hand on his wrist. "Wait," she murmured. The creature hissed, spitting what sounded like a warning in a guttural dialect. More emerged from the shadows, a small group brandishing primitive but clearly dangerous weapons. One stepped forward, feathers ruffling in a display of aggression, or perhaps intimidation. Varish raised her free hand, palm outward. She said something in a low, melodic tone, her scales pulsing with gentle colors. The lead creature cocked its head, listening. Kale realized she might be trying to show they weren't hostile. The tension hung thick. Then the lead creature relaxed slightly, lowering the spear. It made a series of clicking noises, pointing at the ruin's entrance. Kyle glanced at Varish. She gave a tiny shrug. Slowly, they allowed the creatures to shepherd them deeper into the crumbling structure, passing through archways choked with vines. At every step, the creatures watched them closely, spines bristling. Eventually, they entered a dimly lit chamber that smelled of earth and damp stone. Faint, bioluminescent symbols flickered along the walls, and Kale could feel a subtle hum in the air, like an ancient power source still alive beneath layers of time. The group paused in a circular space where a large basin glowed with swirling lights. Kale guessed it was some sort of sacred site. The lead creature chattered and pointed to Varish, then to the basin, as if demanding something. She arched a brow, uncertain. Kale inched forward. "They want you to do something with that water?" he asked softly. She shot him a glare that said she was just as clueless. But the lead creature hissed again, more insistently. Varish knelt by the basin, cautiously dipping her fingers. Immediately, her scales flared bright turquoise like a response to the basin's energy. The local creatures let out soft coos or hisses, apparently intrigued. Kale watched as Varish's eyes fluttered, her expression shifting to one of startled awe. For a moment, she was transfixed, her breathing shallow. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, pulling her fingers free. The lead creature seemed satisfied, stepping back with a respectful inclination. It clicked and pointed toward a corridor leading further in. With a resigned sigh, Kale followed Varish as they were gently herded along. unsure if they were prisoners or guests, or both. They reached another chamber, this one with a domed ceiling that had partially collapsed, letting in a shaft of pale, shimmering light. Rows of stone benches formed a circle, and at the center lay a raised platform engraved with those same swirling glyphs. The local creatures gathered around, forming a watchful semicircle. Varish tensed, glancing at Kale. "I do not like this," she whispered. He gripped his sidearm, keeping it low but ready. Then, from a dark archway, an elderly creature emerged. Draped in tattered fabrics embroidered with luminescent threads, it carried a staff crowned with a softly glowing crystal. The others parted reverently. The elder approached Varish, scrutinizing her with milky eyes. In a croaking voice, it spoke a few words. Varish shook her head. "I do not understand," she said in basic. Kale tried to catch any pattern, but it was entirely alien. Yet the elder placed a clawed hand over its chest, then pointed at Varish's throat, at where her scales still flickered in restless pulses. After a moment's hesitation, Varish placed a hand over her own chest, mirroring the gesture. The elder nodded slowly, then pressed the staff's crystal tip to the center of the platform, causing a swirl of light to ripple across the engravings. Kale took a step back, alarmed, but Varish stood still, transfixed. The elder gestured to her again, as if requesting she place her hand on the carving. Varish shot Kale a questioning look. He shrugged helplessly. She frowned, lips tightening. But the curiosity in her eyes won out. Stepping forward, she placed her palm against the swirling glyphs. Light flared, momentarily blinding. Kale shielded his eyes. An eerie hum filled the chamber. When his vision cleared, Varys stood there trembling, scales flaring a wild cascade of pink, violet, and blue. She gasped, stumbling back, and he rushed to catch her before she collapsed. The local creatures erupted in excited chatter. The elder tapped its staff against the platform, a resonant thrum echoing through the chamber. Varys clung to Call's shoulder, breath ragged. "I saw images in my mind," she whispered, voice trembling. "A melding of memories, or visions." She swallowed, glancing at the elder with wide eyes. "It's like they've recognized me, or they think I'm something important." Kale's stomach twisted in uncertainty. "Are they going to help us or sacrifice us?" She gave him a shaky grin. "Not sure yet." The elder creature approached, speaking again in that clicking dialect. Then it pointed to the exit corridor and motioned for them to follow. The local guards parted, allowing them through. Warily, Kale and Varish walked side by side behind the elder, deeper into the ruin. The passageway took them to a smaller, more secluded chamber lined with glowing stones. The elder gestured for them to enter, then left, staff tapping on the stone floor, leaving them alone. The door slid shut behind them with a smooth motion. They stood in a gently lit space, the walls shimmering with a soft luminescence that radiated warmth. A small fountain trickled in one corner, the water laced with those same bioluminescent motes. Varish swayed, bracing herself against the wall. Kyle steadied her. "Varish?" she exhaled shakily. "I am all right. That energy field was intense." She looked around. "It seems we're not prisoners, but they want us here for some reason." He realized they were in something like a private sanctuary. Soft mats were arranged near the fountain, possibly for rest or meditation. The tension in the air shifted, replaced by a hush of forced calm. Kale's heart still thumped. They'd been dragged into alien ritual and had no idea why, but at least for the moment, the local tribe wasn't attacking them. Varish turned to him, eyes still hazy. "When I touched that platform, I saw glimpses, a path leading beyond the jungle to a place of crystals and cliffs. It felt like the planet was showing me a route." She rubbed her temple. "I think that elder wants us to follow it." Kael's mind whirled. "Could be a clue about how to fix the ship or find a way off this rock," he said. She nodded. "Perhaps. Or it could be a trap." She sank onto one of the mats, shoulders hunched. Kael dropped beside her, uncertain. The faint glow of the stones highlighted the contours of her face, the line of her jaw, the delicate scales along her cheeks. He noticed the exhaustion etched there, but also a kind of deep, bewildered wonder. His gaze lingered on her parted lips, recalling how close they'd come to crossing a boundary the night before. The memory sent a pulse of heat through him. She must have felt it too, because she turned her eyes on him, color rippling at her throat. She searched his face, and for a moment he saw vulnerability flicker there. "We are in unknown territory," she said quietly. "These creatures, they sense something in me, something I do not fully understand." He nodded, voice subdued. "We'll figure it out. Together." Her eyes glinted. "Why do you help me?" she asked, genuine confusion tinging her tone. He considered the question. "Because we're in this mess together, because you saved me as much as I saved you." He hesitated, then added, "And I want to." The last words hung in the air, thick with meaning he couldn't fully articulate. She seemed to study him for a long moment. "You are either a fool or you have a strange courage," she murmured. He laughed softly. "Maybe both." She exhaled, glancing away, though her eyes still flashed with that restless curiosity he'd come to recognize. He felt the pull between them again, like gravity. The hush of the chamber intensified it, the trickling water forming a soft, intimate backdrop. He found himself leaning closer, as if drawn by an unseen force. Her scales flickered a deeper pinkish hue. She parted her lips, breath hitching, and in that moment the tension snapped. He kissed her, tentatively at first, mouth brushing over her parted lips in a fleeting taste of electricity. She stiffened, a tiny gasp escaping her, but didn't pull away. Instead, her hand came up to grip his shoulder, her nails biting into his skin through the fabric. A low, humming sound reverberated from her throat, almost like a purr. The sensation sent a jolt through him. The kiss deepened, the air filling with the heady mixture of her alien scent and the swirl of magic that seemed to pulse in this place. He felt dizzy, his heart pounding as if it might burst. Suddenly she pulled back, trembling, eyes blazing. She pressed a hand to his chest, pushing him away. "This is dangerous," she whispered, voice shaky. He could see the conflict etched across her face, the swirl of color in her scales betraying her emotions. "We are hunted. I cannot afford distractions." Her breath came in ragged gasps. Kael swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "I know," he murmured. "I'm not asking for anything more than this moment." She stared at him, her expression a storm of longing and fear. Then she rose abruptly, pacing to the other side of the chamber, arms folded tight, as if warding off the pull between them. He felt the sting of rejection, but also a flicker of understanding. "Theo, our situation was precarious, their alliance built on necessity, and yet the emotional undercurrents were undeniable." "Varish," he said gently, standing. She waved him off, blinking rapidly. "We will speak no more of it," she managed, though she sounded unsteady. "We need rest. Then we must find out what the Elder wants. Perhaps it leads to a path off this planet." Reluctantly, he nodded, letting the moment dissolve into tense silence. They settled on separate mats, exhaustion creeping in. She curled up, back turned to him, scales still faintly flickering with unsettled colors. He lay down too, the ache of his body overshadowed by the ache of wanting her so fiercely, so inexplicably. Outside, the murmurs of the local tribe floated through the walls, and the ruins' gentle hum lulled him into a restless sleep. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw Varish's face, felt the ghost of her lips on his, and he wondered if, when dawn came again, they'd confront this fragile connection or bury it beneath the next wave of crisis. He woke to the soft glow of the chamber's walls, uncertain how many hours had passed. Varish was already up, speaking quietly with the elder who had returned. The two seemed to be communicating and halting, gestures and occasional melodic hums. Varish must have gleaned a few phrases from the ancient illusions she'd experienced. Kale stood and approached cautiously. The elder tapped the staff on the floor, then pointed toward Varish's chest, making a swirling gesture around her heart. Varish frowned, bristling slightly, but nodded as if she understood. Then the elder turned to Kale, scanning him with those milky eyes. He felt a tingle run down his spine. The elder made a series of clicks and whistles, gesturing to them both. Varish translated, or tried to. "They say, the bond has awakened the path, that we must go to the crystalline cliffs, retrieve something called the heart key. It will guide us." She sounded unsure, but the elder nodded vigorously as she spoke, as if confirming her words. Kael glanced at her. "You sure about this?" She gave him a helpless shrug. As sure as I can be, these illusions I saw, they pointed to a place of tall crystal spires. The tribe believes it is the planet's living core. They think only someone with my energy signature can access it. Kale wiped sweat from his brow. Fine, let's say we do this. We leave the shuttle behind, trek through who knows what looking for a mystical key. How does that help us off this planet? Varys turned to the elder, who was already walking them toward an exit corridor. She shook her head. I can't be sure, but they seem to think it will open a pathway or show us how to repair our vessel. They call it a blessing of the living world. Her voice dripped with skepticism. Kale rubbed his temples. Great. Mystical errands, just my luck. But he saw the half-smile on her lips, and despite everything, it stirred the embers of the night before. They followed the elder out into the main hall, where a few tribal guards watched them with curious eyes. The lead creature from earlier stepped forward, offering them 2 pouches of something that smelled earthy. Varys opened one, sniffed. Supplies, she guessed. Dried fruit, maybe. Kale took the other pouch. At least they're not sending us on our way empty-handed. The elder tapped the staff again, pointing beyond the ruins' entrance into the jungle. Varys turned to Kale. We go now. The sooner we begin, the sooner we can find answers. They departed the ruin under the watchful eyes of the tribe, heading north through the dense forest. Kale's muscles ached from the previous day's exertions, but he pressed on. Varys led, guided by the residual visions that tugged at her mind. She rarely spoke, clearly uneasy about the intangible forces at play. The tension between them lingered unspoken, simmering beneath the surface. Sometimes he caught her looking at him, eyes heavy with conflicting emotions. Each time, she quickly averted her gaze, scales flickering in a swirl of pale pink. Their journey took them across shallow streams that glowed from within, under towering trees whose branches hissed like living serpents. Once they had to skirt a patch of carnivorous plants that snapped at them with sticky tendrils. Varys kept them moving swiftly, her assassin instincts primed. Kale's mind kept drifting, though, back to the kiss and the moment she'd pulled away. He wondered if she regretted it, or if she feared it. He didn't dare ask. By mid-afternoon, they reached a region of the forest where the ground sloped upward, leading to rocky hills. The trees thinned, replaced by strange, twisted spires of stone. The air felt charged, as if the planet's energy was denser here. Varys paused, pressing a hand to one of the rocks. She closed her eyes. Her skin glowed faintly. Kyle watched in fascination. What are you doing? She inhaled, eyes still shut, trying to sense a direction. In my vision, there was a strong pull of resonance. The crystals I saw were singing. Kale frowned. Singing crystals? She lifted her shoulder in a half shrug, then pointed. That way. They hiked onward, eventually cresting a ridge. Beyond it, they saw a vast canyon strewn with massive shards of shimmering crystal that jutted from the ground like jagged teeth. The sunlight caught the facets, reflecting a rainbow of alien color across the canyon walls. A hush fell over them. The sight was both awe-inspiring and eerie. Kale stepped forward, his boots crunching on loose rock. So, we find the heart key in there somewhere? Varys nodded slowly, brows furrowed. I feel something. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They descended carefully into the canyon, the temperature seeming to drop as they approached the crystal formations. A low hum vibrated through the air, setting Kale's teeth on edge. He glanced around warily, half expecting a hidden predator, but the canyon appeared deserted. Shimmering shards towered around them, some as tall as starship fins. Occasionally, faint pulses of light raced along the crystal surfaces, like veins of living energy. The effect was mesmerizing and more than a little unsettling. At the canyon's heart, a particularly large crystal spire rose, ringed by smaller shards that formed a natural amphitheater. Varys approached with caution. Kyle followed, eyes darting around. Any idea what we're looking for? He asked in a hushed tone. She shook her head. I only know we must touch the central spire, the elder's staff. It resembled these crystals. Perhaps the key is hidden within. Kyle studied the spire's smooth surface. A swirl of light danced just beneath as though it were half-translucent. All right, he said, exhaling. Let's do it. Varys took a tentative step, then placed her palm against the crystal. A tremor seemed to pass through the ground. She gasped, the color of her scales flickering wildly. Kale hurried to her side, pressing his free hand against her back. Her body trembled, breath ragged. The crystal glowed brighter, and he felt an odd resonance ripple up his arm. It was akin to the feeling of her presence back in the ruin, only magnified tenfold. Without knowing why, he pressed his own hand to the spire. A pulse of dazzling light enveloped them. For a moment, everything else vanished. He saw flashes of Varish's memories, a savage battlefield, a proud alien clan, a moment of betrayal when she refused a crew. Order, he felt her pain, her longing, then glimpses of his own past flickered by, as though the spirer pulled them from his mind. His father's disapproving face, the heartbreak of losing a comrade, the endless hustle for scraps in a lawless galaxy. The swirl of images left him breathless. Varish let out a choked sound, her mouth open in silent anguish. He realized she was seeing his memories too. The intimacy of it shook him to his core. When the light subsided, they both staggered back, gasping. Varish clutched at the ground, tears in her eyes. Though if her species shed tears, it manifested as a subtle, watery sheen along her scales. Kale crouched beside her, heart pounding, trying to piece together what had happened. In a trembling whisper, she said, "The spire. It showed me everything. You lost so much." He swallowed hard. "I saw your clan, how they turned on you." A hush fell, heavy with shared pain. Then, with a soft crackling sound, part of the crystal spire's surface split open. A small cluster of shards emerged from within, coalescing into a shape that hovered in the air. It glowed with shifting color, forming a teardrop-like cluster that pulsed gently. Varish lifted her gaze, still trembling, as this cluster floated due. Went into her outstretched hands. Its light resonated with the color of her scales. She cradled it, eyes brimming with raw emotion. Kale touched it lightly. A gentle warmth spread through his fingertips. It felt alive. Barish pressed the cluster to her chest, and it merged seamlessly with her scaled mantle, as if being absorbed. A final pulse of light radiated outward, then faded. She exhaled, shoulders sagging. Kyle stared, awe mixing with confusion. "Is that the heart key?" he asked hoarsely. She nodded. "I can feel it inside me. The illusions I saw said it's part of the planet's living essence." A shaky laugh escaped her. "I don't know how, but I sense it can guide us, maybe repair or enhance the ship's systems." Kale slid his arm around her shoulders, helping her stand. She leaned into him, the wall she'd built around herself cracked by the vision they'd just shared. "What now?" he asked. She swallowed. "We go back, see if this can free us from this place. If not, at least we tried." Her voice was laden with exhaustion, but also a faint glimmer of hope. They turned to leave, only to find they were no longer alone. Standing at the canyon's edge were 3 corporate troopers, rifles aimed. Kale's blood went cold. "Great. He tracked us," he muttered. Varish immediately reached for her blade, eyes blazing. One trooper spoke into a comm. "Targets acquired. We have the alien woman. Authorization to engage?" Another trooper barked a laugh. "Let's collect that bounty. The boss will pay a fortune for her and that freak artifact she just grabbed." Kale gritted his teeth, leveling his sidearm. "Varish, get behind!" She cut him off with a growl. "I can handle them." The troopers opened fire. Plasma blasts tore through the air. Kale dove behind a crystal shard, returning fire. One trooper went down. Varish charged forward, blade humming with renewed power, clashing with the second. The third swung a rifle butt at her, but she ducked, slashing in a blur of shimmering color. Kale fired again, the shot grazing the trooper's shoulder. The soldier yelled in pain, stumbled, and Varish finished him with a swift strike. When the dust settled, Varish stood among the fallen troopers, breathing heavily, blade still crackling. Kyle rose from behind the shard, adrenaline roaring in his ears. They locked eyes, the alien hum around them intensifying. He rushed to her side, scanning for injuries. She was panting, a bruise forming on her cheek, but otherwise unhurt. She too, her chest where the heart key lay, a flicker of fear mingled with relief. "They found us once," she said hoarsely. "They'll find us again. We must hurry." Kale nodded, gaze lingering on the troopers. We'll salvage what we can from their gear, then head back to the ruin, or maybe straight to the shuttle. We can't stay here." She agreed, rummaging through the dead men's packs quickly, taking ammo and rations. He grabbed a handheld comm device, which still flickered with static. "We should destroy it," Varish said, "or they'll track it." Kale hesitated, then crushed it under his boot. Done. They locked eyes, a silent vow passing between them. They would survive no matter what. With the heart key pulsing inside her, Varish guided him away from the canyon, the path lit by faint glimmers of resonance. Kale kept one eye on their surroundings, the other on her. She moved with renewed urgency, though the emotional weight of the spire's revelations still clung to her. He could see it in her eyes, how she now knew his pain as intimately as her own. Part of him felt exposed, stripped raw, yet he also felt an unexpected closeness to her, like their hearts had been forcibly intertwined. The day wore on, and by the time they reached the edge of the forest again, Kyle's legs threatened to buckle from exhaustion. Varish didn't seem much better. They paused in the shade of a towering trunk, gulping water. "We'll find a place to camp," Kyle said, voice tight with fatigue. Varish nodded, scales shimmering with leftover adrenaline. They emerged into a clearing just as the planet's twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in swaths of pink and orange. Kale froze in alarm. Smoke curled in the distance, near where their shuttle was parked. "No," he muttered, heart-dropping. "They found it." Varish's jaw clenched, eyes flaring with fury. "We must see if anything remains." Kale nodded, though dread churned in his stomach. Without another word, they sprinted, ignoring their fatigue, following the telltale plumes of black smoke that rose ominously above the alien treetops. They approached the crash site under cover of dusk, hearts pounding. The shuttle was still there, but scorch marks streaked its hull, and the ground was littered with debris. At least half a dozen corporate troopers patrolled the perimeter, searching the wreckage. Kyle and Varish crouched behind thick foliage, scanning the scene. A faint pang of despair threatened to overwhelm him. Even if the ship wasn't completely destroyed, the troopers were obviously setting traps or waiting for them to return. Barish's blade hummed softly in her grip, reflecting the tension coiling through her body. "We cannot fight them all head-on," she whispered. Kale nodded, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, exhausted, and pinned down in a jungle clearing. He looked at Varish, meeting her gold-flecked gaze. "We draw them away," he said quietly. "Set a distraction, slip to the shuttle, see if we can salvage it or repair it with that key thing you got." Varys took a deep breath, pressing a hand to her chest as if feeling the artifact. "All right, do it." They circled the clearing, creeping through vines and undergrowth until they neared a cluster of crates the troopers had piled on one side. Kale rigged a small explosive charge, a last resort from his merc days, setting it to detonate after a short delay. Varish covered him, eyes darting between the patrolling soldiers. When the charge beeped softly in readiness, they scrambled back into the thick vegetation. Kale counted under his breath. 3, 2, 1. The explosion roared, sending a plume of fire skyward. Shouts erupted among the troopers, who scrambled toward the blast. Seizing the moment, Kyle and Varish darted from the bushes to the shuttle's open hatch. Smoke stung Kyle's eyes as they dove inside, slamming the hatch shut behind them. The interior was a wreck. Panels torn open, wires dangling, control boards smashed. Varish let out a hiss of frustration, scanning the damage. Kyle's shoulders slumped. "We're not flying anywhere." She closed her eyes, pressing her hands to a shattered console. "Wait," she said softly. "Let me try." Placing both hands on the ruined circuitry, she inhaled, focusing. A strange glow emanated from her chest, pulsing along her arms into the console. Kale watched in astonishment as the wires flickered with life, arcs of energy dancing between them. It was as if the heart key was feeding power into the systems. Smoke curled around her fingers, but she kept going, brow furrowed with intense concentration. Slowly, the overhead lights blinked, stuttering to life. Kale's heart leapt. "You're doing it," he murmured. Outside, the troopers shouted, presumably alerted to their presence in the shuttle. The hull rattled with gunfire. Kale cursed, returning fire through a small window. "Hurry, Varish," he growled. She only groaned in response, the muscles in her arms trembling. Sweat beaded on her brow. More bullets pinged against the hull. The console sparked violently, nearly throwing her back. Kale grabbed her shoulders. Enough! You'll fry yourself. She shook her head, blinking away tears. I have to fix the engine connections. There is a link. My mind can sense it. Let me try again. Her voice was thin with desperation. He swallowed hard, glancing at the battered corridor. Troopers would breach any second. They had nowhere to run. All right, he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. I've got your back. Do it. She exhaled shakily, steeled herself, then pushed her hands into the console once more. Her scales flared bright white, lines of energy snaking across her skin. Kale positioned himself near the hatch, sidearm ready. The metal door clanged as troopers tried to force it open. He fired shots at the edges, forcing them back, but he knew they'd storm in soon. A wave of electricity flooded the shuttle's systems. Lights blazed, the engine coughed. Kale heard an eager whir of machinery, then a loud pop, and the entire ship shuddered. The interior displays flickered. The overhead panel beeped with a partial startup sequence. Varish collapsed to her knees, panting, color strobing along her skin. Yes. It's done, she whispered, voice raw. We have partial thrust. Maybe we can lift off? Kale rushed to the cockpit, ignoring the gunfire that peppered the hull. Just hold together, he pleaded, flipping switches. The engines roared to sputtering life, though the shuttle vibrated alarmingly. He checked the readouts. Shields at minimal capacity, thrusters half-functional. We might limp out of here. Vera struggled to her feet, staggering to the co-pilot seat. Her eyes were unfocused, but she reached for the controls, guiding power flow. I will push more energy if needed. The hatch buckled under heavy impacts. Kyle engaged the vertical thrusters. The shuttle lurched upward, dragging torn hull plating across the ground. Troopers scattered, firing wildly as the craft ascended. Shots rattled the shields, which glimmered faintly. Varish clenched her teeth, channeling more of the heart key's energy. The controls steadied, the shuttle rising above the clearing. Alarms blared as stray plasma blasts ate at the hull, but they ascended out of immediate range. Kale angled the craft, wincing at the pained groan of the engines. This is insane, he muttered, guiding them beyond the treetops. We won't survive orbit with these systems. Varish closed her eyes. Head for the ruin. The tribe may know how to harness the artifact better. It was a gamble, but they had little choice. He set course, maneuvering as best he could with the damaged thrusters. They skimmed over the jungle canopy, leaving behind a trail of sparks. Within minutes, the ruined stone structures appeared below. Kale eased the shuttle down, mindful that the engines might give out at any second. Tribal figures hurried from the ruin, their glowing stripes visible even from above. Kale landed in an open courtyard, the shuttle barely staying upright. The engines whined, coughed, and died. He exhaled shakily, sweat pouring down his face. Varish slumped in the co-pilot's seat, eyes half-lidded. We're down, he said softly, brushing a hand over her hair. Hey, you still with me? She nodded, though she looked pale. Just drained. Outside, the tribe gathered, chattering anxiously, pointing at the damaged craft. The elder approached, staff clacking. Kale lowered the ramp and stepped out, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. The elder studied the smoking hull, then Varish, whose scales had dimmed to a subdued grayish shade. She clung to Kale's arm, unsteady. The elder tapped the staff near Varish's chest, as if sensing the key's presence. Then it beckoned them inside the temple once more. The tribe cleared a path. Kyle half-carried Varish, guided by the elder into a deeper part of the ruin they hadn't seen before, lined with towering columns etched with swirling designs. At the far end loomed a massive stone door adorned with geometric carvings. The elder pressed a palm to the center, chanting in a series of clicks and rumbles. With a deep groan, the stone door slid open, revealing a hidden chamber flooded with emerald light. Inside, a circle of large crystals pulsed in rhythmic unison, reminiscent of the spire in the canyon. Varish gazed at them, eyes wide with recognition. The elder urged her forward, pointing at the crystals and then at her chest. Kale steadied her, heart racing. She licked her lips, swallowing. I think... They want me to merge the key's energy here. Maybe it can recharge it or amplify it. He nodded, though fear gnawed at him. Will it hurt you? Her gaze flickered with uncertainty. I don't know. But they had no other choice. If this could stabilize the shuttle enough for them to escape the corporate hounds, they had to try. Varish stepped into the circle, the crystals resonating with a faint hum that made Kale's skin tingle. The elder tapped the staff and beams of light converged on Varish. She closed her eyes, arms outstretched, a ghostly aura pulsed around her body, flickering with color. Kale's heart lurched as her face twisted with pain or rapture, he couldn't tell which. Her lips parted, a soft cry escaping. The crystals glowed brighter, humming in harmony. The elder chanted. Then a final burst of light erupted, so bright Kale had to shield his eyes. When the glow faded, Varish sagged to her knees, panting. The crystals dimmed, returning to a soft shimmer. The elder reached down, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She looked up, eyes brimming with tears, but also a fierce determination. I feel, stronger, she whispered, touching her chest. The key is stable now, and I know how to repair the ship. She turned to Kale, eyes shining with possibility. We can get off this planet. A wave of relief and joy nearly knocked him over. He rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace, not caring who watched. She stiffened at first, then melted into his hold, trembling. Their foreheads pressed together, a swirl of pink warming her scales. Thank you, he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Varish, you died, idiot. She let out a shaky laugh, tears slipping between her lashes. We're not free yet, but we're close. The elder and the tribe watched with calm acceptance, as though they'd expected this union, this bond, all along. Kael helped Varish to her feet, guiding her out of the chamber. The door sealed behind them with a heavy thud. Word spread quickly among the tribe that the outsider's vessel would be restored, and some curious onlookers followed them back to the courtyard. Kael eyed the battered hull, hoping whatever knowledge Varish had gained was enough to fix the catastrophic damage. She knelt beneath the port engine, pressing her palm to the cracked plating. Her eyes glowed faintly, and the key within her responded in pulses of multicolored light. Energy coursed along the hull's fractures, sealing them. Panel by panel, the battered shuttle restructured itself. Kale could hardly believe his eyes. This was technology or magic, far beyond anything he'd known. The tribe chattered in awe as the metal fused, the wires knitting together. Varish moved around the vessel, guided by an instinct she didn't question. After nearly an hour of painstaking effort, she stood back, exhausted but victorious. The shuttle now gleamed with a faint, alien sheen, its hull reinforced by the planet's resonant power. Kyle, eyes wide with wonder, climbed the ramp to check the cockpit. The consoles lit up in a swirl of color, the readouts stable. He let out a disbelieving laugh, calling over his shoulder, Varish, come see! She joined him, breath catching at the sight of the revitalized systems. The entire craft felt different, as if part of the planet's living essence had woven itself into the machinery. She touched a panel, and the lights responded with a gentle pulse, as though it recognized her. Behind them, the elder waited patiently at the ramp's base. Kale frowned. What about the tribe? We owe them. We can't just leave without thanking them. Varish nodded. They disembarked and approached the elder together. She placed a hand over her heart, then over the elder's, trying to convey gratitude. The elder pressed its staff lightly to her chest in return, then made a series of soft clicking tones. Varish turned to Kale, her voice trembling with emotion. They say, we are bound to this place now. If ever we return, we will be welcomed. They want us to live. She paused, color rippling across her scales. They know we must go. They will not stop us. Kale's throat tightened. We'll never forget them. Or this planet. The elder gave a solemn nod, stepping aside to let them pass. The tribe parted, chanting a soft melodic phrase that resonated through the courtyard as Kale and Varish boarded the shuttle. Once inside, Kale took the pilot's seat, Varish beside him, her hand resting on the console, as if guiding the ship's new energy. He engaged thrusters, which hummed with smooth power. A trembling grin spread across his face. Ready? He asked, glancing at her. She locked eyes with him, no hesitation in her voice. Let's be free. The shuttle lifted, ascending over the ancient ruins. The tribe watched from below, luminous markings shimmering in farewell. Kael guided them up through the canopy, clouds parting as they climbed higher. The battered warship that once orbited the planet was likely still drifting, but now they had a chance to slip away, outrun the corporate trackers, maybe find a life outside the crosshairs. Beside him, Varish let out a long, slow breath. "We did it," she whispered, though her tone was tinged with lingering sadness. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, ignoring the alarms that might be sounding in corporate strongholds. They'd face that threat together. As they broke through the atmosphere, starlight flooded the cockpit. Varys stared at the vast emptiness of space, a distant glimmer reflecting in her eyes. Kael squeezed her hand gently. She turned to him, a complex swirl of emotions playing across her face. "Where now?" she asked softly. He smiled wearily, thinking of all the dangerous corners of the galaxy they might roam, with bounty hunters on their tail. But for once, the unknown didn't terrify him. "Anywhere," he said, "as long as it's with you." Her scales warmed to a soft pink, and her lips curved into a small, hopeful smile. The hum of the ship's new power pulsed in tandem with their intertwined hands. Outside, the stars beckoned. Yet, even as they prepared to jump to faster than light, Kael felt the weight of unresolved feelings between them, heavier than any bounty. He wondered if this time, she'd let him stand beside her not just as an ally, but as something more. And from the way her thumb stroked his knuckles, the gentle flicker of color in her throat, he dared to believe that she would. They jumped to hyperspace, leaving the planet's swirl of color behind. In the cockpit, the swirling lights of faster-than-light travel bathed them in iridescent hues. Kael set a random course just to lose any possible corporate tail. Once the autopilot engaged, the adrenaline crash hit him like a hammer. He sagged in his seat, rubbing bleary eyes. Varish was equally spent, her posture drooping. Still, her scales maintained a faint glow, a testament to the artifact that now resided in her body. He pivoted his chair, facing her. She gazed back, something raw and unguarded in her eyes. The memory of that kiss, the illusions they'd shared, and the terror of nearly dying a dozen times crackled in the space between them. Silence stretched. Kael swallowed, searching for words. "Back there, on that planet, I saw your memories," he began hesitantly. She tensed, color shifting along her arms. "I know," she said softly, "and I saw yours. Your heartbreak, your fear, your hope." She paused, voice tremulous. "I feel I know you better than I know myself. That frightens me." He nodded, understanding all too well. The forced intimacy of the Spire's visions had bound them, stripping away layers of self-protection. "I didn't ask for that," he said, voice gentle, "but now that it's happened, I don't regret it." She let out a breath, eyes downcast. "Nor do I. Yet it changes everything. Our bond is not like a fleeting desire. My people's traditions say that when life debts intertwine with shared memories, it forms a vow that is difficult to break." Her gaze flickered to his. "I have no clan, no empire, but the old ways remain in me." He reached out, cupping her chin gently, her breath caught, scales flaring pink. "We can figure this out at our own pace," he whispered, leaning closer. "We have time now, right?" She trembled. "I want to believe that," she murmured, lips parting. He bridged the distance, pressing his mouth to hers, softly at first. This time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she inhaled shakily, leaning into the kiss, her blade-calloused fingers sliding over his shoulder. The warmth between them flared, potent and tender, as they explored each other's lips in a slow, careful dance. A small moan escaped her, and he felt the rising intensity of her need. She tasted like ozone and something floral, and the weight of her hands on his back lit every nerve he possessed. Their breathing deepened, hearts pounding. Desire crackled in the cramped cockpit, overshadowing the hum of the engines. Her nails curled into his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space left. The earlier tension, part fear, part longing, coalesced into something urgent, demanding release. He gently broke the kiss, leaning his forehead against hers. Both of them panted in the hush. She stared at him with dilated pupils, scales pulsing in waves of violet and pink. Kyle, she rasped, I want. He swallowed, chest tight with the same yearning. Yes, he whispered back, letting his hand trace the line of her jaw, then drift to the nape of her neck. The intimacy in her eyes held no hesitation now, only a fierce hunger mirrored in his own. She grabbed his wrist, guiding it down to the collar of her top. He felt the ridges of her scaled armor, the straps that fastened across her torso. With a shaky exhale, he unhooked them. She moved to straddle his lap, pressing closer, her breath hot against his ear. The cockpit's dim starlight cast shimmering patterns across her skin. When he slid his hands under the edge of her attire, brushing against the smooth, scaled contour of her waist, she gasped. A mixture of pleasure and vulnerability, the sound drove a spike of warmth through him. They kissed again, harder this time, tongues tangling in an urgent exploration. A flood of sensations overwhelmed him. The unique texture of her scales under his palms, the electric shimmer every time their bodies connected, the hum of the artifact's energy resonating between them. Her hips rolled against him, eliciting a ragged groan. He clenched his teeth, letting his hands roam, mapping every dip and curve. She moaned, nails scraping at his back, each scratch igniting fresh sparks of desire. Bed, he rasped, voice cracking. The cockpit was cramped, consoles blinking dangerously close. She pulled back just enough to nod, eyes dark with need. Together, they stumbled from the cockpit into the shuttle's narrow corridor, half laughing at their clumsiness and breathlessness. The memory of near death fueled every touch with frantic passion, as if they might be torn apart any second. They reached the small sleeping berth, its overhead lights flickering with the newly fused systems. Varish surged forward, pinning him against the wall with surprising strength. He let out a startled chuckle, enthralled by her fire. She ran her hands up his chest, raking nails over the stubble on his jaw before pulling him into a searing kiss. He could barely keep up with her intensity, but he didn't want to slow down. Their tongues clashed, breath mingling in desperate gasps. She tugged at his shirt and he obliged, stripping it off. Her gaze raked over his scars, the tattoos scrawled across his shoulder. He felt self-conscious for half a second, but the raw hunger in her eyes banished that. Her own garment slipped to the floor, revealing the shifting patterns of her scales across her torso and arms. The faint luminescence traced the lines of her muscles, mesmerizing. He cupped her waist, running thumbs over the swirl of color. She trembled at his touch, an involuntary shudder. They tumbled onto the small bunk, limbs entangled. Her mouth found his neck, nibbling and teasing. He groaned, sliding a hand along her back, savoring the press of her body against his. The tension between them mounted, electric. Every kiss, every brush of skin and scale felt like an explosion of sensation. She muttered something in her alien tongue, the resonance of it sparking along his nerves. He answered with a low groan, not caring what the words meant, only that her voice vibrated through him, intensifying everything. Time blurred, their movements became frantic, exploratory, punctuated by gasps and muffled curses. She was unlike any lover he'd known. Dominant one moment, needy the next, her scaled mantle quivering with her every breath. The new synergy in the shuttle's systems echoed the synergy between them, as if the artifact bound them in some primal dance. When his hands slid over the curve of her hips, hooking around to pull her closer, she let out a keening sound, nails digging into his shoulder. Yes, she breathed, eyes fluttering shut. The next moments were a heated tangle of limbs, half lost in the haze of desire and relief. They explored each other in urgent touches and soft moans, raw feelings laid bare. When the crest of pleasure hit, it was like a supernova behind Kale's eyelids, a rush of pure electricity that coursed through both of them. He heard her cry out, felt her body clench, and let himself fall into the oblivion of shared ecstasy. The echoes of their shudders reverberated in the small cabin, mingling with the faint hum of the ship's engines, a testament to survival and stolen intimacy in the face of adversity. Long moments passed before either spoke, their breathing slowed, bodies slick with sweat. She lay atop him, forehead resting on his chest, the gentle glow of her scales reflecting the aftermath. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, the other drifting to stroke her hair. Neither moved, basking in the shimmering warmth of afterglow. Eventually, she stirred, propping gear herself up on an elbow. Her eyes searched his, a softness there that he'd never seen before. "Kyle," she murmured, voice husky. "I." She looked away, color dancing across her cheeks. He smiled gently, lifting a hand to caress her jaw. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I already know." The confession lingered between them, shaped by all that they'd been through. She closed her eyes, leaning into his palm, letting out a sigh that trembled with emotion. They stayed like that, silent and entwined, until the hum of the engines signaled they were nearing the end of their random hyperspace jump. She pressed a final kiss to his chest, then slid off the bunk, collecting pieces of clothing. He watched her move with a newfound sense of awe. The assassin, the exile, the woman who'd risked everything to cling to her honor, and who now clung to him, too. "We should see where we ended up," she said, voice still tinged with warmth. He nodded, forcing himself to stand despite the pleasant ache in his muscles. Together they dressed in the half-lit cabin, exchanging small, shy smiles. It felt surreal. Here they were, sharing closeness after that explosive release, yet still uncertain about the next step. But neither of them questioned bond that had taken root. They returned to the cockpit, the swirling lights of hyperspace dissipated, revealing the star-speckled void. A system's bright sun loomed ahead, and the scanners beeped with new data. Varys slid into the co-pilot seat, focusing on the readouts. "No immediate corporate signals," she reported, relief coloring her tone. "Seems we're in neutral territory." Kale exhaled. "Good. We can lay low, do some real repairs, maybe pick up some supplies." Varys nodded, gently placing a hand on the console, sending a soft pulse of the key's energy through the ship to confirm everything was stable. Then she turned to him, an unspoken question in her eyes. "We keep moving, together?" He reached out, covering her hand with his. "If you'll have me?" She squeezed his fingers, scales tinged with a warm pink. "I will." The shuttle cruised onward through the quiet star field, forging a path into the unknown. Kyle guided them with a steady hand on the controls, Varys at his side, her presence comforting and vital. She gazed at him with a faint smile that spoke volumes of trust and promise. Somewhere out there, threats still loomed. Corporate contracts, bounty hunters, her vengeful clan. But they had each other, and that changed everything. The battered craft hummed with renewed life, a testament to their union and the planet that had bestowed its living essence on them. He shot her a sideways grin. "So, about that vow your people have, the one that forms when life debts and memories merge?" Her expression softened, a playful light in her eyes. "It is not easily severed," she admitted, leaning closer. "Perhaps we see where it leads, pilot." He let out a soft laugh, the tension in his chest melting away. "Sounds like a plan, assassin." She snorted. "Call me that again, and I might show you just how dangerous I can be." But her tone was warm, teasing. He caught her hand, kissed her knuckles, feeling the hum of her alien energy responding. "I look forward to it," he murmured, eyes shining. She rolled her eyes, but her smile was radiant. Had the cosmic horizons stretched into infinity, ripe with peril and possibility. Their future might be uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Kale felt hope and something far more powerful kindling in his chest. Varys turned her gaze to the stars. He did the same, trusting that wherever they went, they would face it together, hearts beating in unison like the pulse of an awakened world, forging a love that defied boundaries of species, culture, and fate itself.